each one is tagged along with a video, and then we have a lot of discussion to try and make sense of what natural selection is. Okay, we've experienced like a live simulation version, but today we're going to try out a computer simulation. Okay, we're going to rewatch this video from last time around, but this time I'd like you to think of address these 3 questions as you go along with it. In the space below, we will have a space to type in your responses. So I'd like you to pay attention to the video and to take down the various points to answer these 3 questions. First question, what type of variation does the phenotype of fur color exhibit? Okay, that's the first question. When I ask you what type of variation, the question I'm asking you is whether it is continuous or discontinuous. That's question number 1 for you to figure out with your friend. Number 2, what is the cause of the variation? What resulted in the variation you see in the coat color? Number 3, I'd like you to tell me and your classmates whether dark fur color is good or bad. Okay, is it inherently good or inherently bad? Alright? Okay, so we'll start the video now.
Across the American Southwest, golden deserts dotted by cacti and brush stretch for miles. Yet here in New Mexico's Valley of Fire, the landscape changes dramatically. Patches of black rock interrupt the scene, remnants of volcanic eruptions that occurred about 1,000 years ago. The eruptions spewed a river of lava more than 40 miles long across the desert. As the molten rock cooled, it darkened, leaving any creature dependent upon camouflage in serious trouble. In the complex battle of life, one of the constant struggles between seeing and not being seen, the evolutionary game of hide and seek. And we've come here to the Valley of Fire in New Mexico, a battlefield, to find one of the tiniest soldiers and what it can teach us about how evolution works. On the desert sands, the rock pocket mouse blends in perfectly, its light-colored fur concealing it from predators. But on dark lava, the same fur makes the mouse stand out, attracting the many creatures that see it as food.
These mice are the Snickers bar of the desert. They're eaten by foxes and coyotes and rattlesnakes and certainly by owls and maybe even occasionally hawks. And most of those predators are visual predators.
So what happened to the pocket mice that found themselves on this new terrain? When I accompanied biologist Michael Nachman onto the lava, it doesn't take long to find out. Nachman has been collecting mice, unharmed in traps. And it's a dark one.
It is, yeah.
Now, are most of the ones you find up here dark?
Almost all.
Not only have the mice here evolved to be as dark as the rock, the color changes occurred precisely where it will conceal them from hunters. And a bit of the white underbelly, too.
That's right. All of the dark ones here in the lava flows have a white underbelly. Presumably there's no selection for dark on the belly because predators are coming to stuff.
Left to themselves, the mice show no preference for light or dark rocks. It's the predators that have made the difference.
The change in color over evolutionary times of population is driven by predators weeding out the mice that don't match their background.
But how did the dark mice arise in the first place?
And when a black mouse appears in a light population of mice, that is usually going to be due to a new mutation. And those are random and rare events.
To fully understand the pocket mouse transformation, Nachman moves from the lava to the lab. He and his team extract DNA from light and dark mice taken from one desert region. cause dark coloration. A mutation is a change in the chemical letters that make up our genes. It's a copying error, and they occur when our cells divide. Mutation seems to mean that something bad is happening. Well, mutations are neither good or bad. Whether they are favored, or whether they are rejected, or whether they're just neutral, depends upon the conditions an organism finds itself. So for the pocket mouse, a mutation that caused the mouse to turn black, that is good if you're living on black rock, and it's bad if you're living out in the sandy desert.
The white mice are all on the bottom. Here,
Fur color is a trait controlled by many genes. To figure out how dark mice evolve, Nachman focuses on how these genes differ in dark and light mice. One by one, the genes prove identical, but at last, something does turn up. The difference between dark and light mice boils down to a difference of 4 chemical letters in a gene called MC1R. Because the gene controls the amount of dark pigment in a mouse's hair follicles, a mouse with these mutations grows dark fur, which gives it an advantage on a dark background. But still, that's one mouse. How would its dark fur spread to a whole population?
this lava flow is about 1,000 years old. And so you might wonder, has there been enough time? It's only been 1,000 years. It's a very short period of time for a new mutation to come along and spread so that all of the mice on this lava flow are black, because really they all are.
Indeed, such a rapid spread of a mutation may seem unlikely until you do the math. And the reason is that while only one new mouse born in 100,000 may be black, hundreds of thousands of mice are born in any given year. And then those mice that are black have enough advantage that their babies do better, and they have more offspring, and their offspring have more offspring. And just about a 5% advantage, compounded year in and year out, can very quickly turn the whole population black, as we see today. If dark color gives mice a 1% competitive advantage, and you start with 1% of the population being dark, in about 1,000 years, 95% of the mice will be dark. If instead, the dark color gives them a 10% advantage, then it only takes 100 years. Thanks to Nachman's mice, science has an example of evolution crystal clear in every detail.
Okay, so that was the video. May I get everyone to consolidate your learning? The 3 questions. I'll give you a minute more to consolidate your points for the first half. to the second tab, run up the simulation if you are done. Okay, we're going to look at some of your points. I particularly like this chapter because there's a lot of room for discussion. One may even start to think about the world around us, whether evolution still takes place. Does evolution still take place in humans? Is there natural selection in humans? Okay, so let's look at some of the points by your friends. So 3 questions. What type of variation? What caused the variation? Last but not least, is dark fur good or bad? First, we have Nivita. She says it is continuous because it's based on the external. Second, she said environment color. I forgot what the second question is. What is the cause of the variation? Nivita, are you saying that it's caused by the environment? Okay. Third, it depends on which rock the mouse lives inside. Fair enough? Yeah? Depends on the environment it lives in. Okay, so let's address point 1 and 2. Is this a form of continuous or discontinuous variation? Okay, so we recap the definition of both. Something that's described with continuous variation means that there is no distinct category. There is a spectrum. So example, let's say hair color of ours. We have no distinctly black or white, but instead we have a spectrum. You can be from very dark to very light. Yeah? Very often the graph that you will see, let's say even for the graph of height, you do not find people in 2 categories of height, short to tall. No. Instead, we always find a spectrum that runs from the extreme ends as well as a large population of people tend to be a certain height. That's continuous variation. Something that's discontinuous would be something where you only have distinct traits, like maybe blood type. You have blood type either A, B, O, or AB. So in this particular instance, when you look at fur color, what kind of variation is it? Is it, as it's brought up, that it is a form of discontinuous, yeah, because there is only light or dark. If we had seen like there is a semi-light or semi-dark or in-betweens, right, then that we might say is continuous, because we only see 2 distinct categories. Yes?
Where the shade of dark will be like
Okay, but in this particular context, right, it is actually, it's either only this or that. There wasn't a mouse, there wasn't a pocket mice, there was just slightly less black or extremely black. They were really just purely black. Okay? But in our human instance, when we look at hair color, right, we tend to see it as a spectrum of sorts. So what is the cause of the variation? This question is an interesting question. Because what this question is asking is, in your population, you had white mouse as well as black ones. So what caused this variation to begin with? It is more so mutation. Yeah? Mutation is more so the cause, but I like the fact that many of us grow up in the environment. The environment doesn't cause the variation, it can change the proportion of the variation. Okay, so that's the difference that we want to bring up here. So for example, Amanda brought up that mutation in the genes result in either dark or light. Yeah? So the cause of this, why is there dark and light, is because of mutations. But we can change the proportion of mice that has dark or light, but with the help of the environment. Yeah? So when someone asks you what is the cause of the variation, we might also want to be very clear about what the question is asking. What caused it versus what changes the proportion of the variation. Our third question was, which fur color is good? Whether black color is good or bad. A lot of us brought up that neither. It really depends on the background it's on. Emily said that it depends on where the pocket mice lives. If it's on a dark lava, then chances are the dark fur is a preferable one. But if it's on light one, then it's not so good. So Charlotte, for example, says it's good if the mice lives on a dark one. Yeah? That is the concept of natural selection. In this second simulation over here, you can click on this particular simulation now to have a look.
Super slow. I had it running for so long and like.
Oh, yours is lagging?
No, like for it. Like,
Oh, you want it to change?
yeah,
Okay.
forever.
I like this simulation. It is built off the case study that we just looked at. This is a desert plain with a lot of, all the circles represent the pocket mice that has this brown fur. But when the volcano erupts, you get some lava forming. Watch what happens if you give it enough time.
I think you need like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So,
Need 5-10 minutes?
Yeah.
But what can we glean from this? Natural selection is not a very fast process. You know why? Because it really depends on how fast the organism reproduces. If it reproduces at a slow rate, you will not see the change over just one generation. Notice new mice are spawning each time, and then new ones are being dragged away. It takes many generations of mice before you can actually see the effect. But you can sort of see more and more black mice having the opportunity to reproduce and produce more. Yes? Wow, okay. So Aziz brought up another lens. He said, okay, so your question is, what if we look at it from the perspective of the predator? Right? Okay, so your question is your question therefore, is the predator evolving?
Can we also assume that the predator has some mutation in the eyesight that we can see?
Okay, perhaps.
They can see better than they can see the white one or the blue one, right? Like if you have black color or black color rock, it is definitely much harder for them, for predator to see compared to black and white.
Like better eyesight, they can still see, they can better see the black mice and the black dogs.
It doesn't matter because then like black mice is too dominant there.
Oh, but Aziz, so is scientists are you asking, is it possible for it, black already, as you were talking, right, evolution took place, okay, natural selection took place. Okay, so as this is your question, therefore, the predators now, in the sense how you think about predators, they are kind of at a disadvantage, right? They're only pretty good at seeing the brown mice but not the black one, right? Isn't the predator now selected against, right? Those that cannot see the dark mice, they will start to die off, right? So, is your question therefore, what if there's a mutation that allows the eagle to see dark mice better? Could that eagle therefore start to be the predominant eagle that has a higher chance of reproducing and generating more? My answer to that is possible. Okay, so in this, what we are looking at is only from the perspective of the mouse. In reality, in life, next time you study evolution, you may come across the word co-evolution, where both predator and the prey evolve together. So imagine now the eagle gets really good at spotting black mice, right? The black mice may now this will no longer be an advantage. You may need to wait for some random mutation to appear that maybe this new mutation allows for the mice to move faster. Then we may end up with mice across the whole population that starts to grow over generations, move faster and faster and faster. Then you will end up needing eagle that can spot fast moving mice that are black color. This is a competition. It's really a competition, a tug of war, co-evolution. So, therefore, what is the skill for you to pick up from this particular chapter? These are the two skills I hope you can pick up. Number one, that you can identify the environment factor that acts as a selection pressure. So what do I mean by that? In this particular environment, can you clearly tell me what is the selection pressure? So for example, what we can give you is, I may give you a context. I may describe to you a scenario. From that scenario, I may ask you, can you identify what the selection pressure is? In this particular instance, for the pocket mice, what is the selection pressure? The predator? Possible? Okay, some students may say that whether you can camouflage or not, the larva is the selection pressure. What do you think?
I don't think so. It's like indirectly, not directly influenced by the predator eating the mice.
Okay. So I say, kind of, but it's kind of indirect. Because without the predators, right, actually nothing will really change. So the predators are the selection pressure. Next, identify the variation that confers a selective advantage. So, are you able to identify which trait has a selective advantage in a particular environment? Let's say we have a new environment where it is just larva. There is dark color. Are you able to identify the selective advantage? Yeah, so in this case it will be black. So this is the skill I hope you can pick up, so that if we were to ask you to describe how something changed over time, natural selection, you will be able to identify the selection pressure and which one has the advantage. That's really the skill to pick up. The only thing I hope they don't leave with this at the end of this whole lesson is that natural selection can happen, evolution can take place on an individual level. What do I mean by that? If I were to plug this particular mouse and I put it inside a dark environment, this mouse will not spontaneously turn black. Yeah? But that is the misconception a lot of people in the general public have that do not study this particular chapter in science. They think it's like Pokemon. You know Pokemon? From Squirtle, we don't play, I don't know if you know what I'm saying. Yeah? From a Squirtle, it can become a Water Turtle, then become a Blastoise, or Charmander become a Charmeleon, then a Charizard. Yeah? So that is not evolution. You know what it is? Okay, that is more like, have you heard of this word metamorphosis? Yeah? That is more like metamorphosis. That is like a caterpillar turning into a cocoon, then into a butterfly. So, next time if a Pokemon evolves, you go and correct someone else and say that's not true. Then you go and explain everything else. That's really not evolution. So, actually a lot of us, biologists, we have a lot of trouble fighting against this misconception. Because a lot of people, when we come to the table, we have an idea of what evolution is. My evolution, right, is really Pokemon games. This is the first time I heard evolution. Then another time that you may have heard the word evolution is someone may use the word evolve to imply that it's a good thing in life. Right? I evolved to be a better person. Right? But is that necessarily good? Is it necessarily bad? It depends on the environment. Really. Okay, so if I were to ask you to identify the selection pressure, or to tell me which mass has selective advantage, are you able to do so? If you find you're able to do so, then you understand the concept of natural selection. Hold on, I'm going to pick up a call. I'm not sure if it's urgent. Hello? Everything okay? Oh, can you tell the GO person that I said, oh, you must have been sorry, someone not feeling well.
It will take over the other animal.
Okay, so with all this general knowledge in mind, let's look at COVID. What do you think? Okay, with your understanding of natural selection at this point, a few questions come to mind, right, when you look at COVID-19. Number one, natural selection created new COVID-19 variants. Do you agree or disagree? Yeah, say again. Natural selection created new COVID-19 variants. Do you agree or disagree? Then my question will be again, what caused the variation? It says, what's the selection pressure? What would be the selective advantage here? Okay, second, okay, hold on, sorry, I'm coming to you. Second, survival of the fittest means the strongest virus survives. What do you think? Okay, alright, I'd like you to spend some time discussing with your friends. Based on what your understanding is about natural selection now, what do you think about these two questions? I'd like you to share your views below. I've also provided an info chart comparing two variants, Delta and Omicron. So that you have something to base your arguments on. Sorry, Kenneth. Alright, so what do you think? Is it definitely? Yes. Sometimes it has to do with enzyme pathway. Let's say a particular enzyme that, let's say the dominant allele produces a form of the enzyme that can catalyze a reaction better, maybe faster, or maybe overtakes another reaction, then that one may be the dominant. So when we say something is dominant, it doesn't mean it's better, but it could be whatever it produces, right, ends up taking over what the recessive allele produced.
So it's possible that
Correct. It could also be recessive. You're right, yeah, mutation could be dominant or recessive. But in this particular example of natural selection, right, we notice we have not dealt with whether dominant or recessive. We are just looking at whether it's good or bad. So you're right, actually, a good allele could be dominant or recessive, but it depends on the environment. We don't know. At least I have not read up enough to know whether it's recessive or not. Yeah.
Can it change from being recessive to dominant?
Unlikely. Yeah. Yes.
Interesting good things.
Very often our metamorphosis, right, is better in like for example, caterpillar becomes butterfly, right? Doesn't not right? But what you're implying, right, is that this caterpillar right? But it doesn't happen. It is like saying well, giraffe. You like to treat them in a place with all the size, right? You say the giraffes are the size.
Mine was usually like all
But in reality, there's
I used to.
mutations usually happen very, very close. Then over time, it starts to divide, and the whole organism will cut.
I think it was that is my word.
Why do you say so?
I probably think it is
In a sense, yeah. In a sense, our immune system is like a dragon.
last year.
Yeah, what's the issue?
Wait, so what are you question, right?
So do you have
Is it natural selection that created like the virus?
What does it mean to be different? We don't need to divide because it's
So yes,
because
each mutation gets stronger, is it?
but I like you to think in your eyes, right, when you
Each
see pictures,
mutation gets like causes the virus to
the
become
virus is more potent. Or is that described more easy? Is that yeah, so what does filters mean?
So
If that was the case,
after
right,
each mutation,
then any that is not very strong, right, it will be
the virus became
Yeah, so chances are
or became
So what does
more
filters mean?
became more preventive.
Could this be anything but I don't know. No, I don't think so. If we threw these two questions out, we need to
Just, right.
spark a discussion and conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what?
Okay, so right. No, there is a right, but it's a fun discussion to arise. Right?
Omicron is more contagious, but
Okay,
it's smaller
so let's have a quick discussion.
severity.
I don't know if you all talked to each other yet. Okay, if you have not input your points, you just extract out some of you. Okay, so let's look at the questions. First question, natural selection created new variants. What do you think? Okay, so we have some points over here by your friends. Disagree. Who is this? Amanda feels that the variants were caused by mutations. Yeah? and there was little selection pressure from the environment. Okay, so Amanda, what are you trying to say here? Do you think that the cause is the mutation or is it the environment? Yeah. Ah, okay. So, are you therefore implying that without variation, without mutation, natural selection can still take place? Okay, so I have a question for you. Can natural selection take place if there is zero variation in the population? For example, if all the mice were white color, can natural selection take place?
Yeah, assuming everything is the same, right?
Yeah. Okay, you just go extinct.
Depends on like whether the rate of them reproducing is faster than their rate.
Okay, so you are saying that depend on how fast they reproduce. They reproduce faster than the eagles can eat, right? Then they won't disappear necessarily.
Yeah, Singapore.
So,
they die.
is evolution equals to natural selection? Now, let me think about this. Is evolution equals to natural selection?
Not really.
Okay, what do you think?
I don't think the dictionary.
No, right?
This is the way like.
This is not LA. This is, there is a right or wrong here.
Yeah.
Evolution is it equals to natural selection? Okay, but if you shake your head, then you must be able to be very clear what's the difference between the two. Yes.
Isn't it evolution is like the side genetic mutation, but natural selection is the genetic mutation or like the difference in the gene is already there. It's just that it continues to stay on because of the surrounding environment.
Okay, say again. So you're saying natural selection, the mutation.
The mutation already exists, but then it only continues to carry on because it is favorable and certain environment. Like
Okay.
evolution is it changed although there was no pressure from the surrounding.
Ah, okay. So evolution has no pressure.
I don't think it's no pressure, it just changed for no reason.
Yeah, it just changed from the start.
Masha, you have something you want to share? I feel like you are arriving at something.
Isn't natural selection like only after like consolidation of birth,
Uh-huh.
and then that's when natural selection occurs, like
Yeah.
the taking out of certain
Yeah.
whereas evolution is like the whole process of like the mutation and natural selection.
Ah, okay. So for yourself, you feel natural selection is more short term. Am I misconstruing what you're saying? Or natural selection is the process of that you are selecting for something.
Yeah,
But evolution is
like your
you look at from start all the way to end, you see after many generations that the population has changed. Yeah? Okay. Marshall is kind of there in terms of the difference. Evolution, if I put it in layman's term, just means that there is a change in proportion of traits over time. Okay? There's a change in the proportion of certain trait over time. Natural selection is just one of the ways we can cause this change. Okay? It will only make a little bit more sense, right, if I show you other ways we can cause the population to evolve. Okay? By the way, this is my layman definition. I will not ask you to define evolution. Okay? Because when I bring the word traits, it implies therefore proportion of certain alleles over time. Okay? Natural selection is just one of the methods can lead to this change. To make this a little bit more clearer, I didn't quite understand what my teacher meant when they said this when I was in class. Then when I went to university, then they showed me other methods of evolution. And then I was like, oh, okay, so that's what you mean, this is just one way that a population's traits or alleles can change over time. Okay. So let's talk about natural selection first. We use the example of mice. Let's say we have white and black mice in a population. In the case of natural selection, there may be a selection pressure. Let's say it's a black environment. You'll find that these fellas have a higher chance of reproducing. Go on to the next generation, you may find more and more black mice over time. Right? This is our current view of how certain traits and alleles can change over time. Actually, there are other ways you can change the proportion of mice with certain traits. I'll show you another method, but this method is a little bit very rough. Let's say I again have white mice as well as some black mice. What if, rather than having predators come down to swoop them away, okay, what if it's a little bit more random? What if there was an earthquake, and the earthquake resulted in a separation? These fellas end up falling to the sea. Then we are left with two white mice. These two white mice may go on to produce more mice with white color, just because by chance the black mice drop into the sea.
Isn't that like super unlikely?
This is not natural selection, because there wasn't a pressure, there wasn't a selective advantage, there was no pressure per se, it was just by chance. The black ones fell into the sea. This is another method. Actually, this method is called genetic drift. Population just changed by chance. Okay? So just like make clear, natural selection is just one of the methods that can result in evolution. There are many other ways we can change the proportion of traits and alleles in a population. Sometimes it can be random. Sometimes it can be a result of a particular pressure acting on a particular trait. Yeah? And there are actually a lot of other ways that a population could evolve. Then we have a question. Actually, how about you all think about COVID-19? COVID-19, what do you think is the selection pressure?
Hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer. Actually, I don't know it. Light boy. That has been the selection pressure. No, like your virus, you need a host to survive, right? Individuals like yourself.
White blood cell.
Could your white blood cells of the immune system be the selection pressure? Possible? What about vaccines? Are they the selection pressure? But you know what vaccines are, right? Purpose of vaccines. Yeah, inject you to what? To make stronger white blood cells, right? Again? To create a memory B cells. And in a sense, you're preparing your immune system, right? So what is the selection pressure here, you think? Okay, personally, okay, that's why I'm not very sure what the answer would be, but I thought this question was interesting. Personally, I would like to think our immune system was a selection pressure. Okay, and then you all brought a very interesting point. Is this still natural selection if we purposely strengthen your immune system with a vaccine?
We just created another environment.
Yeah.
And then it actually happened. It's like you form a place and then it takes left and then like ice.
Oh yeah, okay, so if we go back to this example, if it had not been a lava, instead all you go around the desert start sprinkling black sand. Is that natural selection still?
agree.
But then, was it the black sand that killed the cat mice? It's still the eagle, right? Ah. Okay, so if we temper, is this still counted as natural selection?
But why is it in temple cannot, but animals can considered?
Okay, so personally, I like to think that this, if you sprinkle black sand, and then after that the eagles come and grab the mice, right? This is still natural because the predators are the treasure. So in our case, our immune system is still natural, destroying the virus, but we could have strengthened all of them. But I don't think the strengthening is really the pressure still. It is your immune system as the pressure. Is one virus better than the other? So survival of the fittest means the strongest virus survive. What do you think? Can we see some of our sharing? Agreed. Omicron became predominant strain because it's able to infect people easier and faster. You see, what's your definition of strong or fittest?
Yeah, well, I say that one.
Yeah, never define it. What is fittest?
Yeah.
So how will you define fittest in this case? Which one is more predominant? In what? Predominant meaning in the population? But then that's like the after effect. Okay, so are you saying that we can call an organism fitter if after a certain amount of time we see that it is a predominant trait? Oh, okay. Fair enough. No. What is this that say? No, yeah. Thus define strongest virus as the virus with the highest death rates for humans. Oh, okay. Such virus may not be the one who survived, as Delta is more deadly than Omicron but became less prevalent. One explanation includes killing the patients too fast. The virus cannot spread to others. Actually, a strong virus would be one that can kill you very fast. But the funny thing is, we can kill you very fast, it cannot transmit to someone else fast. So, yeah, I'll let you take away this. When we say survival of the fittest in natural selection, the fittest doesn't mean that you have to be the strongest. The fittest just means whether you have a higher chance to reproduce, pass on whatever you have. Sometimes what gives you the higher chance may not be that you're stronger. It could be in this case that you're weaker. That because you can evade the immune system, you can jump from one person to another, you have a higher chance to reproduce, higher chance you'll be found in the next generation. This is very interesting, this case study. Fittest does not equal to strongest. Fittest just means whether you are reproductively fit enough to go to the next generation. And what could confer you that reproductive fitness could be not necessarily strength per se. It could be, whether this mouse is black or white, right, doesn't mean that it is stronger or weaker, right? It just means whether it has a higher chance to reproduce. So really the fitness here is about reproduction. So what do you look forward to? You look forward to, in subsequent times, if you want to assess your understanding, we give you case studies. Yeah? We give you case studies and we want you to interpret the case studies. Can you figure out what may have led from one population changing and evolving to something else? Can you identify the pressures? Can you identify the advantages or disadvantages? Nivita brought up that a weak virus may be able to survive better than a strong one. Okay, but again, I would like to bring up that really, what is the cause of variation is always mutation. Yeah, that is the starting point. The next lesson I see you, we're going to look at how humans can take over the selection pressure and we start doing wacky things with it. And we've been doing it since the dawn of time. Okay, thank you. I'll see you in the next lesson.